My wife lied about her debt while I covered every expense, so I walked away and bought the house she thought she would inherit. I'm a 31-year-old guy. And for years I thought being a husband meant covering everything while my wife pursued her dreams. I've always been responsible, the kind of person who meticulously budgets every paycheck, saves for the future, and makes sure bills are paid on time. When I met Melissa, she was charming, ambitious, and full of energies, someone who seemed like she could conquer the world if she just had a little support. At first it was small things, splitting groceries, picking up the extra utilities, covering a few weekend expenses here and there. But those small things quickly snowballed. Soon I was footing the rent, utilities, vacations, and even helping with her professional workshops. All while she reassured me with that soft smile, saying, "I promise I'll pay you back someday." It felt good, in a way. Like I was building a shared future with someone I loved. I believed our partnership was a balance of dreams, her ambition, and my stability. I'd come home after long days at work, exhausted, only to hear her excitedly recount the project she was working on or the networking event she couldn't afford. I'd smile, nod, and tell her, "Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out," even if my stomach twisted at the thought of yet another expense I hadn't budgeted for. But there were cracks I couldn't ignore. Melissa never liked to talk about exact amounts. When I asked how much the utilities or the new software subscription would cost, she'd fidget or brush it off, saying, "It's nothing. Don't stress about it." And sometimes, when I gently pressed for clarity, she'd get defensive. "Why are you making this a big deal? It's not like I'm spending that much." Her tone would sting more than the actual numbers, planting a subtle doubt in my mind. Then one night, while reviewing our joint account, I noticed a few withdrawals I didn't recognize. They were small, almost insignificant on paper, but my gut twisted. Something about the pattern felt off. Like I was missing a part of the story, an invisible thread running through our finances. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and whispered to myself, "Why didn't she tell me about this?" A chill ran down my spine. I had no idea that this was only the very beginning of what I was about to uncover. I tried to shake off that uneasy feeling, telling myself maybe it was just a late fee or an automatic subscription I had forgotten. But deep down, a knot had formed in my chest, one that refused to loosen. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to every transaction, every receipt, every little expense. It was exhausting, like I had to play detective in my own home, but I convinced myself I was doing it for the sake of US4, Melissa, and our future. She still had that effortless charm, talking about her goals, her networking events, and the portfolio she wanted to build. I wanted to believe in that shared dream so badly that I ignored the tightening knot in my gut. Melissa would praise me constantly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," she'd say, resting her head on my shoulder while I scrolled through our budget on my laptop. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Her words felt like validation, like my sacrifices were meaningful, like my long hours at work and extra shifts were actually building a life we both wanted. And yet, the numbers never quite matched the story she was telling. Every time I asked for specifics, how much she spent on groceries, the cost of that online course, or her rent contributions, she'd deflect. "It's fine, really," she'd insist, waving a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. I've got it handled." But her eyes flicked away, and her hands fidgeted in a way that didn't line up with her words. Friends started making offhand comments too. "Are you sure she's being honest about her spending?" One asked casually over drinks. I laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Of course she's grateful. She's just busy with work." But I couldn't ignore the seed of doubt that had been planted. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the hum of the refrigerator filled the room, I found myself scanning our account statements again. Small charges kept popping up, things Melissa couldn't explain. Small, but frequent, like shadows creeping along the edges of a familiar wall. One evening, she left her laptop open while making dinner. A notification popped up. A payment Melissa made that wasn't on our shared plan. My stomach turned cold as I stared at it, realizing I couldn't remember her ever mentioning it. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, and whispered to myself, "This isn't just a mistake, is it?" Something in the air felt heavier that night, like the calm before a storm I couldn't yet see coming. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe Melissa had just forgotten to mention a bill or two, or maybe it was a simple misunderstanding. But the feeling of unease refused to leave me. Every time I walked past her desk or glanced at her phone lying face up on the counter, a tiny spike of anxiety shot through me. I started noticing patterns: small withdrawals here, purchases there, subscriptions I had never approved. They were minor individually, almost laughable. But together, they formed a mosaic of secrecy I couldn't ignore. One night, as we were folding laundry together, I tried casually bringing it up. "Hey, did you make that payment for?" I trailed off, hoping she'd fill in the blank honestly. Melissa's hands froze mid-fold, and she forced a laugh. "Oh, that? Yeah, just some bills I had to catch up on." "Don't worry about it," she said, her eyes darting away. That flicker of avoidance, so subtle, yet unmistakable, made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the money. It was the hiding, the deflection. The way she made me feel guilty for even asking. I began replaying every conversation we had about money, noticing the tiny excuses I had ignored. "I'll pay you back soon," or "it's just a small thing. You don't need to worry." I had been too trusting, too eager to believe in her charm and our shared dream. But now, in the quiet of our apartment, I felt a gnawing realization. Something was off. She had been leaning on me more than I realized, letting me carry not just the financial weight, but the emotional one too. The worst part? The house felt smaller. I could sense the tension lingering, like a shadow following me from room to room. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded different, heavier, reminding me of the things I couldn't yet name. My mind kept drifting back to that notification on her laptop weeks ago, the one that didn't fit any logical explanation. I had ignored it at first, but now I couldn't unsee it. Later that night, while scrolling through our shared account, another unexplained withdrawal appeared, larger this time, and from a lender I didn't recognize. I felt a pit open in my chest, and my hands trembled slightly as I whispered into the dark apartment, "What are you hiding from me?" The silence that followed felt suffocating, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The more I dug into our joint account, the more the pieces started to fit together, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Melissa had been hiding debt from my credit cards, personal loans, overdue bills, all accumulating quietly while I thought we were building a life together. The shock hit like a punch to the gut. I stared at the numbers on the screen, each one a betrayal, each one a testament to the trust I had given her blindly. I felt sick, angry, and betrayed all at once, but mostly I felt foolish for believing that love meant I had to cover everything without question. That night, I confronted her. "Melissa, we need to talk." "I saw the account," I said, my voice shaking even though I tried to keep it steady. She looked up from the kitchen counter, her expression a mix of surprise and irritation. "What do you mean?" she asked a bit too calmly. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my words clear. "These debts. You didn't tell me? How long have you been hiding this?" Her eyes flicked to the floor, and she fumbled for an excuse. "I didn't want to stress you out," she said softly, almost pleading. "I thought I could handle it on my own." I felt a wave of disbelief and hurt wash over me. Years of paying bills, covering rent, groceries, vacations, every sacrifice I made suddenly felt tainted by deceit. The emotional weight crushed me. I had built my life around honesty and partnership, only to realize I was alone in carrying the burden. The apartment felt colder, the walls closer, as if the air itself had turned against me. I couldn't believe the woman I loved could manipulate me so thoroughly, hiding such a fundamental truth. I spent hours that night lying awake on the couch, scrolling through every transaction, every message, every casual excuse she had ever given me. It all added up, and the truth was undeniable. I had been deceived. My heart pounded as I realized this wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about respect, about being seen as a partner instead of a walking wallet. And in that dark, quiet apartment, I whispered to myself, almost as if saying it aloud would make it real, "I can't do this anymore, can I?" The weight of that question hung in the air, heavier than any bill or debt could ever be. I thought the worst had been Melissa's lies, but I couldn't have been more wrong. A few days later, while looking through some old emails she had left open on her laptop, I stumbled on something that made my stomach drop straight to the floor. There were messages between her and her sister, discussing strategies to keep me from finding out about her debts, joking about how he'll just keep paying anyway and don't stress him with the details. I reread them over and over, disbelief mixing with rage. Melissa hadn't just deceived me. Her family had been complicit the whole time. Every whispered reassurance, every grateful smile, every "I'll pay you back someday" was part of a carefully crafted act I had been blind to for years. I confronted her immediately. "Melissa, were they in on this? Your sister? Your parents?" I asked, my voice tight with barely contained anger. She froze, avoiding my gaze. I didn't think you'd understand. They were trying to help me," she stammered, her words a flimsy shield against the truth. My chest felt heavy, my hands shook, and the apartment seemed suddenly smaller, the air thick and suffocating. I realized then that every sacrifice I had made, every bill I had paid, had been taken for granted not just by her, but by an entire network of people who were supposed to love and respect me. The betrayal cut deeper than money ever could. This wasn't just a private deception. It was an orchestrated betrayal, and I had been the unsuspecting victim. My mind raced as I tried to process years of manipulation. I felt anger, humiliation, and heartbreak all rolled into one, a storm I couldn't escape. The life I thought I had built with her, the shared dreams. The future we planned was built on lies. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, the city lights flickering below me, feeling a deep ache in my chest. The cool night air did nothing to calm the burning realization. Everything I thought was love, trust, and partnership had been a carefully maintained illusion. And in that silence, I made a quiet, firm vow to myself. I can't let this define me. I won't be their fool anymore. But I had no idea just how far the betrayal went, or how much it would cost me to reclaim my life. I hit a point I never thought I would, the absolute bottom. It wasn't just the lies or the debts anymore. It was the total collapse of everything I believed our marriage stood for. I sat on the edge of the bed one night, staring at the walls of our apartment, and felt completely hollow. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on my chest. Years of long hours, sacrifices, and unwavering trust flashed before my eyes, and I realized all of it had been manipulated. Every vacation I had paid for, every dinner, every late-night run to cover an unexpected bill, it all meant nothing in the grand scheme of Melissa's deception. I could barely sleep, and when I did, nightmares of conversations replayed in my head. Her voice, her reassurances, the way she smiled while deflecting questions. "I'll pay you back," she'd said so many times, and I had believed it. I thought it was love. Now, the phrase echoed like a cruel joke. Friends tried to reach me, but I couldn't respond. Every call felt like an interrogation, a reminder that I was drowning in someone else's lies. The most painful moment came when Melissa, sensing my distance, tried to reach out with that familiar charm. "Why are you being so cold?" "I thought we were a team," she said, leaning against the doorframe. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, the deceit, the hidden debts, the family collusion, but the words lodged in my throat. I felt powerless, manipulated, and completely exhausted. The trust I had invested so fully in her and our marriage had been siphoned away, leaving a hollow shell of me in its wake. Even the apartment, once a place of shared dreams and comfort, felt alien. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the faint smell of Melissa's perfume, they all became reminders of betrayal. I curled up on the couch, staring at the ceiling, and whispered to myself, "I can't keep living like this. But I don't know how to stop it either." I realized then that nothing would ever be the same. I had hit my emotional rock bottom, and yet somewhere deep inside, a small ember of clarity began to burn. I couldn't undo the past, but maybe I could reclaim my future. The thought was terrifying, and I didn't know where to start, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to walk away. I remember the moment I finally made the decision. Sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills, debt notices, and hidden credit card statements, I realized I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. Melissa came in, her usual smile plastered on her face, and said, "You've been distant lately. Talk to me." I felt a surge of anger mixed with exhaustion. "I know about everything," I said, my voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. She tried to explain, deflect, charm her way back into my sympathy, but I didn't give her the chance. For the first time in years, I was thinking about me. I packed a bag, separating what was mine, what belonged to both of us, and what I would leave behind. Each item felt like a symbolic release: the furniture, the photos, even the small trinkets she had assumed I didn't notice. I could hear her voice behind me, pleading, "We can fix this." I'll change, but I tuned it out. My mind was focused, my heart clear. That night I slept alone in a small Airbnb I had booked, just to breathe. It was strange, empty, quiet, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't have to consider her debts, her lies, or the manipulation of her family. I realized I could rebuild, step by step, reclaim control over my life, my finances, my future. The relief was intoxicating, but so was the fear. Walking away felt liberating and terrifying all at once. As I stared out the window at the city lights below, I whispered to myself, "I'm done being her fool. It's time to live for me." And in that quiet moment, I knew the real challenge had only just begun. The first few weeks after leaving were disorienting. I'd gone from living in constant tension, second-guessing every move, to complete freedom, and it was overwhelming. I spent hours reviewing our finances, separating what was truly mine and putting the rest out of reach. The sense of betrayal lingered like smoke in the air, but I started to breathe again. I began therapy, talking through years of manipulation, the guilt I had carried, and the disbelief that someone I loved could lie so completely. Melissa tried to contact me multiple times, leaving voicemails, sending texts, even emails with promises of honesty and change. I didn't respond. Each attempt felt like a test of my resolve, and I refused to give her the satisfaction. Slowly, I started to rediscover myself, going to the gym, reconnecting with friends I had neglected, and even taking small trips alone. Each step reminded me that life could be peaceful and joyful without her deceit. I'd never realized how much I had lost to her lies: the freedom to think for myself, the ability to trust my instincts, the emotional energy I had poured into someone who had no intention of reciprocating. And yet, as painful as it was, there was also a strange sense of empowerment. I realized I could rebuild stronger, smarter, with boundaries that no one could cross. But the thought of Melissa, still out there, benefiting from what I had once provided, gnawed at me. I knew I couldn't leave the story unfinished. There had to be a way to reclaim what she had stolen from me, not with anger, but with quiet, undeniable power. And that thought began to take root as I plotted the next move. Taking control of my finances was harder than I imagined. For years, I had allowed Melissa and her family to manipulate not just my heart, but my wallet. Every bill I had paid, every vacation, every extra cent I had spent to support her dreams, it had all been siphoned from my future. I began auditing accounts, consolidating funds, and making sure every penny was secure. The sense of control returned slowly, like light breaking through a stormy sky. She tried legal maneuvers, claiming partial ownership of certain purchases, but I had anticipated this. Every document, every bank statement, every email had been carefully archived. For the first time, I felt untouchable, not in arrogance, but in confidence that honesty and foresight were my weapons. Even friends noticed a change. "You look different," one said. "Stronger." I nodded, quietly acknowledging the truth I had just discovered about myself. And then came the moment that truly shifted my mindset. I found the house Melissa had always fantasized about inheriting from her family, luxurious. Coveted property she often mentioned in casual conversation. The thought hit me like a spark. What if I could turn the tables completely? Not through confrontation or revenge theater, but through planning, patience, and quiet authority. The idea consumed me. As I drove past the house that weekend, seeing the sun glint off the windows, I whispered to myself, "This could be mine, and she'll never see it coming." The air in the car felt electric, filled with anticipation. And for the first time in years, I felt a thrill that wasn't tainted by betrayal. The stage was set. I pulled the trigger months later. With my finances finally secure, I purchased the house Melissa had assumed would be hers. I toured it quietly, imagining her surprise, the shock in her voice, the disbelief she would feel. The house itself was beautiful, sun streaming through the windows, the air crisp and full of potential. It wasn't just a property. It was proof that I had reclaimed my power, my freedom, and my dignity. I had taken what she assumed she would inherit and made it my own. When word got back to Melissa, the reactions were priceless. She was furious, pleading, incredulous, and humiliated, all without me lifting a finger to confront her. Friends and mutual acquaintances began murmuring, some astonished, some envious, but everyone recognized the reversal of power. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. Quiet triumph felt far sweeter than spectacle ever could. I began living my life fully in that space. Every corner a reminder that I had risen from manipulation to mastery. The kitchen, the living room, even the backyard, everything reflected choices made with honesty and care, not deceit and hidden agendas. Each morning I woke up and felt gratitude for the journey, painful as it had been. I had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Still, there was a subtle thrill in knowing Melissa would never forget the lesson. I could feel her tension through mutual friends, the unspoken acknowledgement that her games had backfired spectacularly. And in that quiet victory, I realized the final, most satisfying truth. The power to reclaim your life is far more intoxicating than revenge itself. Melissa finally reached out directly. Desperate this time. "Please, I made mistakes. Can we talk?" she wrote. I read the message once, twice, then deleted it without reply. I realized confrontation wasn't necessary. The statement of truth had already been made through my actions. I didn't need to justify my decisions or explain the betrayal any further. My life, my choices, my reclaimed home, spoke louder than words ever could. Friends asked how I could be so calm, so composed after everything. I told them it wasn't about being cold. It was about recognizing that some people will never change. And the best revenge isn't anger, it's a life lived fully and freely. I had set boundaries, protected my future, and removed myself from the toxic cycle. Melissa's attempts to contact me grew desperate, pleading, even emotional, but I stayed silent. Her family, who had once colluded in deceit, remained stunned. The apartment she still occupied became a symbol of the past, empty, manipulative, irrelevant. Every day in my new home reinforced the lesson. Honesty, self-respect, and careful planning win over charm, lies, and entitlement. I could finally focus on my career, friendships, and personal growth without the shadow of manipulation hanging over me. And yet, there was a moment late at night when I stood on the balcony of my new home and breathed in the crisp air, realizing something profound. I had turned betrayal into empowerment. I had taken the ultimate control, not by confrontation, but by walking away quietly, decisively, and triumphantly. Life after Melissa is nothing like I imagined it would be. The freedom, clarity, and quiet joy I feel every day are intoxicating. I've rebuilt my finances, strengthened friendships, and even started investing in things I once postponed for the sake of her dreams. The house stands as a monument to independence, a daily reminder that honesty and foresight outmatch charm and deceit. I still reflect on the betrayal, the hidden debts, the family collusion, the manipulation, but now those memories fuel my growth rather than my despair. Sometimes I think about Melissa, about how she might reach out or attempt to manipulate the situation again. I don't worry anymore. I've learned that empowerment isn't about punishing someone else. It's about reclaiming your life and refusing to be exploited. The lessons are hard, but they're mine. They make me stronger. I smile as I host friends in the house she once assumed she would inherit. Laughter, warmth, and honesty fill the rooms. Everything she tried to take away from me now exists fully in my hands. The past no longer haunts me. It teaches me. I've survived the betrayal, walked away with dignity, and built a life that no lies can touch. And sometimes, late at night, I sit by the window, looking out over the city lights, and whisper quietly to myself, I own my life now. I'm free. And I'll never let anyone take that from me again. The sense of closure is complete, but the story of growth, vigilance, and empowerment lingers, a reminder that even in betrayal, strength can rise.